I'm using types instead of interfaces in my projects nowadays, and in this video, I will explain why you should do the same. So here we have this type user data, and here we are assuming that we have this React component where you use this user data that is sent as props to this user component. So here we have the user data.name that is defined here in this type, but we can use the interface instead, and it does exactly the same job. So for extending both of them, as most of you must be familiar already, for example, if we have to use something called the persistent user data, we can have this user ID here, and this user ID is something that it will be used here for the user data. The same way we can extend this type and have this, let's have like the type, persistent user data, and here we use this, that is the intersection keyword. So here, as you can see, we are doing exactly the same thing. So we can render here our user ID. We just need to change this type to use the persisted user. This brings us to the first difference between types and interfaces. That is, on the types, we always have to use the and, the intersection keyword, to extend the type. And for interfaces, we have this method we already implemented here, but also at the same time, we can have an interface user data that has the user ID. So in this case, if we use the user data here, we can see that we have the user ID available and the name available. And whatever interfaces we have with the name user data, it will just add properties to the existing interface. And what happens in the real world when working as a team is that once you give all this flexibility to developers, it can lead to errors. So the more unexpected outcomes we have, like the more properties we have, but we are not sure that we have implementations to cover those new properties, the more likely we are to face errors when in a team setup. What we have here in the types is a safe net. So here we are always making sure that whenever we want to use the user ID, we have to use the persistent user data. Otherwise, we would get an error. So that's good for us. And once I give it back, as we had it before, we don't have an error anymore because this property exists in our extended object. The second difference between types and interfaces is pretty much that here for types, we can have, for example, a type phone, and this phone can be a string or an array of strings. And what happens here is that once I get to write the phone, I can use this type, and then we can have a phone type, which is pretty much like this, like a string or an array of strings. And this is a limitation compared to the interfaces, because here on interfaces, we cannot have a type that is not an object linked to an interface. Here on the interfaces, let me show you here that we have like these types. But once I want to add the phone as a type, like an interface phone, the interface phone can only have a property called phone, but this is an object declaration. We cannot have something like phone string string. This is not something doable. We cannot assign the type. So this is an issue and a limitation for the interfaces compared to types. So given this interface limitation, what we could do here is have a phone that its type is string union keyword and string array. But with this limitation, we lose reusability. And we all know that in the software development, this is a very important topic. So instead of using an interface font that is impossible, we can have the types here declared like using the union keyword to make it available for different types so we can reuse the font all over our code base without any problem.